I'm Jason from Smoking and Drinking in Space, a sci-fi podcast from a couple guys who think they know sci-fi.
And I'm Rob from Smoking and Drinking in Capes, a superhero podcast from a couple guys who wish they had powers.
And we're part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
And you can find other cool, awesome, geeky shows at gonnageeknetwork.com.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue 174. Good grief. Every number, it gets higher and higher, and I still can't get over it. Anyway, we are talking Jonah Hex, not the horrific movie, but the character upon which that movie was ostensibly based. Kind of, sort of. I'm just glad Josh Brolin didn't have such a terrible experience from that movie that he opted out of comic book movies forever, because then we wouldn't have gotten Thanos or Cable, but mostly Thanos. Before we get into that, though, we have fantastic news. If you didn't get a chance to see our social media pages, we will be doing our first ever panel appearance at a convention. We have been selected by the heads of PuchiCon in Atlantic City to give a panel on Sunday, May 14th. And we are going to be taking our first ever dip into the world of manga. And as famously, I know little to nothing about manga, I said to Doc, who's a character that we should do a panel discussion on? And you chose
Vash the Stampede from Trigun, which has a better anime than manga, but I got introduced to the manga first, so it counts.
Yep. I found out about this convention through Extra Life, who longtime listeners know is a charity that raises money for Children's Miracle Network and their affiliated hospitals through video games. And I was on a conference call with the other leadership from New Jersey, and the hospital rep said, oh, and we're looking to have a table set up at PuchiCon and in Atlantic City. And I said, oh, I've never heard of that convention before. And I looked it up, and here's the thing about PuchiCon. It's largely anime and manga focused, but the organizers make it very clear that this convention is specifically set up to be a safe space for women, people of color, minorities, LGBTQ plus community, that they have a strong focus on mental health and very much establishing that there are portions of this community, of the fandom community, that go underrepresented. And it's very much playing in the same sandbox as us. And they were taking panel applications. And I said, well, we might as well give it a shot. And so I said, but if we're going to do this, let's do a manga character. And that's when I reached out to Doc, and he picked Vash the Stampede. And then we just found out not that long ago that we got selected. And I scared my wife and son, because I got the email and I just started yelling excitedly, and they had no idea what was happening. So I had to explain that. My wife understood. My son didn't really get what I was trying to explain to him. And I just said, I get to talk to people and try and help them. And then he said, cool. And he gave me a high five and a fist bump. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. My daughter obviously has no idea what the hell's going on, but whatever. So we will have links to the convention in the show notes. So if you are in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland area, and you are available for that weekend, we would love to come see you. We're going to have giveaway stuff there. Not exactly sure what yet, but we'll get something to give away. And hopefully we will come away with some new fans. It's going to be very different than our usual fare, but that's what makes it enticing and intriguing. But in any case, before we get to PuchiCon, let's talk about Jonah Hex. So let's get into the background. Jonah Hex, created by John Albano and Tony DeZuinga in All-Star Western number 10 in March of 1972. So Jonah Hex is born in 1838 to an alcoholic father who sold him at age 13 to Apaches as a slave, like you do. So he gets betrayed by his adopted brother in the tribe and left to die. Years later, when he encounters the tribe once again, he reveals the betrayal to the rest of the tribe. This involved a woman, to the surprise of nobody, because that's how they were going to write it. So he is forced to battle his brother, but his brother sabotages the tomahawk during the battle, and he's forced to stab him with a knife. And in response, the chief, who's father of the boy who was killed, he scars his face with a heated tomahawk and exiles him. So then he goes off to serve as a bounty hunter. And your average Jonah Hex story is very serialized because it's very much he wanders the Old West searching for bounties, or he's in a situation where stuff goes sideways and his reputation precedes him. And so now they're hoping that the incredible gunslinger Jonah Hex can save them, or he is sought out by other people who have heard about how great he is with a gun. And they say, I don't think you're all that. I'm going to take my shot at you. And then Jonah has to defend himself. Those are basically the three flavors of Jonah Hex stories that exist. Lather, rinse, repeat. So most of his stories do stay in his own time period, but he has been brought forward a handful of stories. The Lords of Time compile a team to battle the Justice League and the Justice Society, and that includes Jonah, who was also incorporated into Crisis on Infinite Earths to battle the Anti-Monitor. At one point, he gets kidnapped and brought to post-apocalyptic 21st century Seattle to fight for the man who kidnapped him, but he escaped and continued to rove the country looking for a way to return home. Now, despite the fact that he is horrifically disfigured, he still manages to have relationships with several women, including at least 2 marriages. The first one was to a Chinese woman named Mei Ling, and that ended when she became pregnant and then ran off with a child, Jason, who wasn't in Jonah's life until Jason was an adult and Jonah was an old man. And the second marriage was to a Native American woman named Tallbird, and this was later on in his life. After he gets killed by a man who survived a bounty hit, his corpse was sold and put on display several times as like a, hey, we've got the body of Jonah Hex, like a traveling sideshow type deal, until Tallbird acquired it and finally managed to give him a proper burial. She was like 100 by the time all this happens. As I said, there are only a handful of different stories that you can tell about Jonah Hex, and that's why I'm not going to really delve into the story and the arcs, because there really aren't that many. I mean, I'm doing a disservice, and I'm sure there are some Jonah Hex diehards out there who are going to say, oh, what about this arc? What about that arc? Et cetera, et cetera. What about Trumbull and a handful of the enemies that pop up consistently? But by and large, those are your flavors of Jonah Hex stories. So we're going to get into the issues. And the theme is walking to the beat of your own broken drum. So the first one is, we said at the very beginning of the background, he was abused by his alcoholic father. His mother didn't do a lot to get him out of that situation. And eventually she left because she abandoned Jonah when he was around 10, because her husband, Jonah's father, was such an abuser that she said, I can't take it, but didn't bring Jonah with her, just left him there for the abuse. And then Woodson, as I said, proceeded to sell him off into slavery. So really great father that Woodson Hex was.
Yeah. Oh boy, this is bad. I know we've had several characters that have dealt with abuse. In this case, it's abuse without sense of protection, meaning for many other characters, you can understand how a person, because that is the one biologically responsible for your life, finding some way to justify why they're being treated the way they are. Either they start to incorporate the idea that something is wrong with them, or that if they just do a little better, things will improve. Or if this person is doing something like this, well, they're not that way all the time, and they try and look for the positives in the parents or whatever. Jonah's got none of that. Jonah got really screwed over. And so
forget the idea that you're trying to look for the silver lining. You're looking to live. You're looking to actually survive. And we are back to square one of the hierarchy of needs. And as brutal as we say, regardless of, I know for the story's sake, it says slavery. It could be the foster system if people feel that's more relatable. It can be an ongoing abusive household, whatever. All of those things are going to impact the idea that if you take it the wrong way, you can lose your complete sense of agency. But as we see with the character of Jonah, it really doesn't happen that way. It's more that I have lost my sense of trust in anything lasting. So the way he ends up surviving is that he takes it upon himself to do what he can. And regardless of age, if a person is willing to put that out there and bet on themselves, it can work. It's an incredibly difficult way to do it. It leaves a person emotionally stunted and distant, but yeah, you'll live another day. And it can lead to a person having a very short-term mindset because you're not going to worry about tomorrow if you don't even survive today. So there are really lasting ramifications for that. And until proven otherwise, the real common sense answer to this, though, is I don't have anything to disprove my evidence. So it's not that it gives justification as to how a person is treated when they're abused. If a person is able to last that long, then it just becomes more fuel for the fire. And boy, there's potentially a lot of fire, a lot of anger, a lot of rage, and clearly in Jonah's case, a lot of violence.
Yeah, that anger and rage is 100% justified. As we would say in my family, he has really big feelings. Unfortunately, he doesn't know what to do with them appropriately because, and we've talked about on the show many times, he didn't have anybody to show him. Woodrow certainly wasn't going to show him. And Ginny, his mother, wasn't around long enough to instill that because her primary focus again was survival. So he never got modeling for what a healthy relationship was supposed to be like. He never got a model for what anger management or emotional management was going to look like. I don't know what Woodrow's backstory was prior to fathering Jonah, but I imagine if he's dealing with it through alcohol and abuse, probably wasn't good on his end. And so it's just an unfortunate situation where the cycle perpetuates, until you get someone who's strong enough to break that cycle or show you how to break that cycle. It's just going to continue. And we'll get into that a little bit with the third issue. But insofar as his bad track record with family goes, we're going to continue that with the second issue, which is that he was betrayed by his adopted brother in the tribe. Now, he's sold into slavery and he's worked like a slave accordingly until he manages to save the chief from, I believe it was a puma. It's a warthog. No, it's a puma.
Wow. Red versus blue, really?
Yeah. Red versus blue season 1.
Yeah. Wow.
Hey, Griff was a chupa thingy. But in all seriousness, so he saves the chieftain's life, and the chieftain is like, now you're my adopted son, and this is my actual son, and that didn't sit well with him. And then they both fall in love with the same woman, and the adopted brother says, I need to get rid of this white man by any means necessary. And so, as I said, he betrays him and leaves him to die. So Jonah, once again, gets screwed over by family.
And this is, once again, what we come to with evidence-based thinking for humans. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool twice with the don't get fooled again. Sorry, that's a George W. Bush reference. But no, the whole idea that if you didn't think you were able to develop trust in people before and you actually did something right and you were going to get rewarded for it even more, and someone that in theory should be happy for you is not, and you almost die for it, what's the lesson that you should learn? Don't trust anyone. So, okay, that's one way to go about it. And once again, does that allow him to survive? Yes. Does it lead to more death? Destruction? Yes. Does it lead to more anger for the people that he continues to cause pain for because pain was inflicted on him? Yes, hurt people hurt people. I don't want to sound too idealistic, though. I don't want to make it sound like he should have turned the other cheek when he had the opportunity and just have a sit down with the chief and the brother and all that. Like, that wasn't going to happen. But even just finding a way to get out of a situation, if you can, without continuing a conflict can be a less problematic resolution. And I know for some people, even right now, some people think that that's blasphemous to say, as if every single battle has to be one that is fought and you just die on that hill no matter what, because that's what life is all about. I get it. I can understand it. But if you notice that your own pattern of behavior is adding to the pain of other people's abusive behavior, then one side of the coin has to really look at what's going on and stop it. Because we're not just talking now about a cycle of abuse. We're talking about an entire ecosystem of abuse. That is much more destructive for multiple people. And sorry to say, while one person can make a difference, usually the biggest difference they can make is extracting themselves. And yet, the most common reaction to it is to double down and to just dig in more because, we have basically it's like a sunk cost fallacy. Like, okay, well, this is the way it's been for so long. If I do anything else, then all of that previous effort will have been wasted. That's a fallacy in terms of logic, but it's very common. What I like to do instead is I like to look at these situations as forget the circumstances that led to the relationship, be that biological or circumstantial. If you had to start from scratch right now and you don't have the same obligations that you do, because I don't want to say, heaven forbid, it's a marriage or something like that. I'm not saying throw away your relationship with the children, throw away your job, all that stuff. I just want to make it clear I'm setting, artificial boundaries here. But if you had that from jump, like from the start, right now, starting fresh, would you be willing to put in the effort for this particular relationship? And you have to be honest with yourself. And the other person has to be honest with themselves. If there's a mismatch, you could try and work it out. If both sides agree, then there is a good chance that going with the mutual decision would work. So I'm not saying that if you have a relationship that's been problematic or troubling and it's family related, that you need to just separate it. You need to let it go. I'm not saying that because someone is family, that you automatically have to constantly fight and bond together. I'm saying that both sides can come to rational conclusions that are better if they are able to look at it as a whole and try and flip it around and look at the other person's perspective rather than just this idea one way or the other. Like, no matter what, I just have to keep doing exactly the way things have been for my entire existence. Because doing that just means that you'll get more than likely the same painful results.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I was going to say, with respect to relationships, it's not a foolproof thing, but it helps if you can frame it with the other person as us versus the problem rather than me versus you. If you do that, if you come at the problem as me versus my partner, one of us has to win, one of us has to lose, zero-sum mindset, then it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause friction. If you can come at it, though, as us versus the problem and have that communication, then the odds are, it's not guaranteed, but the odds are that you're going to end up with a more satisfactory resolution. But you have to be able to have those conversations. You have to be honest with the partner about that. And you also have to be willing to hear the honesty from the other person. And at least, speaking as a married man, that's something that I've been doing my level best to work on over the course of my marriage. But it's the same thing with a sibling as well. If you're talking to your sibling and you're saying, hey, listen, I feel like we're constantly at each other's throats, or we're constantly arguing over this, that, and the other. Like, what can we do to resolve this so that we're not always fighting because the fighting doesn't make me feel good. The fighting doesn't bring me closer to you. The fighting doesn't strengthen our relationship. Then, that's where you have to be honest with the other person and be willing to deal with the outcome of whatever it is that is said. That if, to your point, if you can't find that mutual decision, then maybe that's a situation where you have to say, either I'm going to walk away or I have to continue to live with and maintain this relationship with the understanding that it's always going to be this way. But you have to try and have that discussion first. And again, it requires a level of honesty. It requires a level of self-awareness, and it requires a level of acceptance that not everybody has, just speaking frankly. But if you can get there, by and large, over time, the relationships that you do manage to hold on to and maintain will be that much stronger. A lot of people, and we've all been there at various points where you're saying, well, it's not perfect, but it's better than being alone. And that comes from insecurity of self. That comes from societal pressures. There's a whole host of things there. If you can get to that point where you're secure enough in yourself to say, I will not stand for this anymore, and put up those boundaries and hold them and maintain them, it's going to cause some pain in the beginning, but in the long run, overall, you'll be a lot happier and healthier. And it was kind of, a bit of a tangential way, and it wasn't exactly related to some of the things that you were discussing. But, when you talk about conflict resolution among family members and among relationships and things of that nature, I can speak from experience on that because I spent a lot of my life avoiding conflict because it was just easier to just grin and bear it, whatever. And now I find that as I've gotten older, my desire to put up with bullshit has drastically reduced. So I go, listen, I'm going to put up these boundaries, and if you don't like it, that's a you problem. So that's kind of my advice. So learn from my experience so you don't have to go through 40 years of nonsense before finally coming to these realizations like I did.
Right. I agree with everything you said. I just want to point out that the one difference is that the things that you were pointing out have to do with the idea that you are put in a situation where you want that type of relationship, or at some point that relationship is considered a positive thing. The way I was approaching it was that Jonah's situation was negative from the start. And if you're at that starting point, it's a little different because that's where extraction can often be the first thing to look at rather than the last, Sure. So that's just to clarify why I was coming from the angle where I was coming from, because everything you said makes perfect sense. No question about it. So
yes, I wasn't thinking of it like that because I wasn't put in a situation where I didn't want to be there or whatever. There is a difference there where it starts. So speaking of relationships that you really weren't put in there where you wanted to be, let's talk about the third one. His son, Jason. He didn't really know Jason until Jason was an adult. And then Jonah essentially wanted nothing to do with him because he said, your mom left because I didn't want to change, and that was her call. So I got nothing to say to you. And it's a shame because here was a man who was so abused by his own father, and he had an opportunity. I'm not saying he had to welcome him with open arms, but he didn't really learn his lesson. Maybe he did, in that he didn't beat Jason.
So if the lesson, and let's really tie this together because it's building upon building upon building. You learn from an early age that people that are in positions of supposed authority and support can cause significant amounts of pain to you. You learn that people that are supposed to be on par with you as a peer, and actually as a person that's supposed to share a bond with you, can cause incredible amounts of suffering and potentially destroy your life. And while you may know I'm almost going to sound like a preacher here. While you may know the physical enjoyment of others' company and the pleasures of life, be it just hanging out, whatever other forms of entertainment, having physical relationships, all sorts of different things. Let's bring it to our world. Having a job, creating a family, all these other things like that may, in theory, be the positive things because you didn't have that base to begin with, it's really much more difficult to make those types of connections. And I think the most telling thing is when, in this case, your own wife pretty much says, "Oh, this ain't gonna work. I'm out." when once again, similar to what I was saying, where Jonah may have had that opportunity to do that with his brother, his wife does that to him. And it's unfortunate where, in theory, that is the situation where Anthony's description was very apropos and should have taken that form. And unfortunately, both parties didn't even really get that opportunity. And it extends down once again to another generation. I am not putting this, obviously, on Jason any more than I'm not putting it on Jonah when he was abused or had all the other negative things happen to him. And yet, when you mention what lessons are learned, it's that if in theory, I go back to that original statement that hurt people, if Jonah has recognized that he's still hurt, why would he want to be around someone else? Why? Because there's a good chance he would end up hurting him. Well, maybe he doesn't want to spread that hurt. So in a very perverse way, he might be thinking, and once again, this is speculation. I'm not saying this, but lots of people create their narrative as to how things are working. And in this case, he's trying to spare the pain, both for himself and for his biological son. If I don't know you, I can't harm you. I can't abuse you the way that my abuser did. I don't even give you the opportunity to experience that. Of course, many of us who haven't had that experience or have come to different conclusions, even if we have had that experience, may be quicker to say, right, but you also have an opportunity to rewrite the script. You can really start to have a positive impact on someone else so that the cycle is truly broken. As opposed to now, there's an opportunity for a different type of abuse. In this case, it would be neglect. Now, is it neglect in the sense of not caring for a defenseless child? No. We're saying the person is an adult, meaning they may have, or may not, I don't know, but have the skills necessary to survive in society. But maybe there is still an opportunity there for some learning, mentoring, friendship, other things that you don't always think about as a parent to a child, because the first thing you're doing is all of the survival stuff and, making sure that you have the proper environment, nurturing all of the different areas that a child needs to develop, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you don't have that, you have a human being that, if they sought you out, may have an interest, even if it's just to learn about you. You can instill the idea like, look, here's a horrible traumatic history. I'm grateful I survived that. And I'm glad, I hope that you didn't go through the same thing. Even that can be a teachable moment. And yet it all gets thrown away. Once again, if anybody's been in these types of situations, I apologize if that was sounding harsh. That's not the intention. Everybody has to come from these circumstances with whatever has worked for them. And I really am a believer that people make decisions that they think are going to be the best in the moment based on the information at hand. Whether or not it turns out to be true is a different story, maybe because of the lack of tools or, timing was off or whatever. So I'm not shaming anyone in these discussions. But at the same time, I would also like to say that for those of you that wonder about these things, there's always an opportunity for new things to happen in life, whatever time it is. So I do hope that if people have had positive experiences and they can help other people learn, it doesn't have to be a biological thing. It doesn't have to go that far. But I really do think that cycles of abuse do end. The question is how soon and by whom. And if you have the opportunity to end it, I hope you take the chance.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of strength to do that, to break that cycle, especially one that's perpetuated for generations potentially. But the relief that can come with that and the feeling of freedom that comes with that is incredible. And it's empowering. And to just reiterate again what Doc said, I would highly encourage everybody to do what you can, take the steps if you are in that type of a situation. We obviously don't know everybody's background, everyone's history. But if you are in that type of situation, take the steps, because it's going to ultimately lead to a better life, a healthier life, a freer life in the long run. And I'm glad that in this case, to some of the things that you were saying, Doc, Jonah chose not to physically abuse Jason. He chose not to take it out on him in that way. The cycle's obviously not broken, but it's stalled and it's shifted. And hopefully at some point, Jason becomes a better father to his children than Jonah was to him. Certainly better than Woodson was to him. And, maybe by our time, chronologically speaking, someone in the Hex family has a decent relationship with their kids. One can only hope. So we're going to take a break, plug a couple shows. When we get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
Have you ever wondered what Scotch will make your palate feel like it's just gone on a majestic journey through the Highlands? If LeBron will ever win another ring? Or if the Leafs will ever win another Stanley Cup?
Mike, if they tune in to Scotch and Sports, they're going to find all that out and more. They're going to find out what's souring our Scotch, what our next Scotch on the shelf is, and our On the Rocks segment, where we debate 2 topics. You just met Mike. I'm Gertie. We got suds coming up, and we may be drinking Scotch, but our biased opinions don't change no matter how much we've had, and we have quite a bit. We'll even answer viewer questions, so send them in, and if you don't like the answer, well, we'll just have to have another Scotch, and we can still all be friends.
We even talk a little, or a lot, of pop culture. Where else can you find hot takes on WandaVision, NFL analysis, and the fact that the Leafs will in fact win the Stanley Cup this year? Answer, Scotch and Sports.
Have you ever been reading through a stack of comics and thought, maybe I should see what this Arkham Asylum game is all about? Or been playing Marvel vs. Capcom and felt like you were at a real disadvantage since you didn't know who half the characters were? Well, Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So whether you know the comics and want to know how all these games work, or you know the games and want to find out where all this craziness came from, go check out Play Comics at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey, this is Cullen Bunn, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So treatment. In universe for Jonah Hex.
So I'm actually trying to put myself in his situation, and I'm going to definitely use one that I've used before, but just maybe a little spin on it. And I know this is problematic. Please, people, don't let your minds wander too much. I want to be a bounty. I want to be a target for him. Jonah focuses on certain things. If he needs to get the job done, he'll get it done. Obviously, I want to be taken in alive. Okay. But maybe it's one of those old Western comedy tropes or whatever, and make of it what you will. But although I'll admit I'm very introverted, I think if I had a situation where I didn't feel like I was being threatened by the person, even if I were captured, I think I could have some conversations. And a guy like that who doesn't get close to people, I'm sure would be annoyed by me. But as anybody who has ever dealt with me knows, I'm not exactly a threatening person. And as long as the conversation isn't too on the nose, I think I could, do a little bit of therapy. He doesn't have to know it's therapy, but might be able to talk some things out in a way that he doesn't feel is a threat. And that's important. What do I mean by that? Because in certain ways, a therapist can be closer than any other person in someone's life, depending on how they decide to live it. There are things that some people will tell their counselor well before they'll tell their spouse. And I'm not advocating that, by the way. Okay. But I'm saying it happens. And if a person does have certain things that they just simply don't talk to anyone about because they feel like it's gone, it's buried and all of that, and yet the consequences of it still show up from their actions and their emotions, then no, I don't have to dig up every detail of what a person has suffered in terms of abuse or anything like that. But I do think it's relevant to have the person acknowledge if they haven't developed the coping mechanisms that might be healthier so that they don't perpetuate that cycle. So I think I basically would be that guy that's tied up in the back, just making these little comments here and there little pithy statements that may or may not tick him off in the moment, but then over time, just kind of to use Arsenio Hall, like kind of makes him go, just get the ball rolling.
Okay. Just hope that you don't piss him off enough that he goes, this bounty ain't worth it.
Right.
Because I've seen that movie before, literally. So hopefully that it works out better for you than it did for some of those people. So out of universe then, and here's the thing about Jonah Hex, he doesn't have any supernatural abilities in the overwhelming majority of the stories. Every once in a while, if he gets brought forward in time, he'll be given an ability. I know that in the movie, he could talk to the dead or reanimate them or something along those lines. Otherwise, his only ability is that he is a really good shot.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So forget all that. I mean, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with, and to no surprise to anyone, like we're dealing with trauma. That's what we're dealing with. I mean, it just goes back to that basic, okay, what are you presenting? Are you presenting with mood lability? Are you presenting with complaints from others rather than from yourself because you're trying to live your life a certain way and everybody around you seems to complain about it? I think that's much closer to what Jonah kind of represents here. I have to be that person, or I have to make sure that Jonah as a patient is not trying to change his style because that has allowed him to survive this long. I need to change his own perception of how that style is impacting others, because usually there's a lot more pain behind that than people like this are willing to acknowledge. Their point is, if I'm breathing, if I'm working, if I still have all the physical capabilities that I have always had, then you know what? Life is good. And at the most base level, that's okay. Sometimes it can actually lead, at least in the moment, to a bit more depression when you introduce the idea or expose the person to ideas that there may be more to life than that, especially in the relationships category, both with family and friends and even just basic acquaintances that last a long time. And when the person does that, sometimes that reflection leads to depression because their point is, oh, wow, this is lost time. And the idea is not that you're trying to make them feel bad about how things have gone before. It's just recognizing that I'm grateful that you still have the opportunity for things to continue to bloom in the future and making it very forward focused. As long as that happens, then you can continue to have growth. I think what happens commonly, especially for patients that have significant trauma histories that have never had the opportunity to talk about it with someone in a way that they feel comfortable, they may overshare. They may get to the point where they're trying to tell you every single detail of everything that happened. You don't want to get to that point because not to sound too crass, but it becomes kind of a waste because now it's like, all right, I'm not your narrator. I'm not your encyclopedia. If you want to do that, write a book. That's fine. I apologize for my tone with that. I'm saying like that can be a great thing, write a book, but that's not what therapy is about. If you want to do things better from this point forward, then yes, we will talk about maybe how you've handled things previously and what may work differently now. But I am not going to try and create a log of every single thing that's ever happened in your life because it was bad. So some people really need to know that's not what therapy's for. So ironically, rather than saying what therapy is, because I know we've done that plenty of times, I'm going to say what therapy is not.
That's a very good point to make. We do focus a lot on the show about what to do in therapy. We don't often talk about what not to do in therapy. And I think in many ways that's just as important because you want to be efficient with it. You don't have unlimited time. The therapist does not have unlimited time. And to your point, you can't just unload every single thing that has ever happened to you on this person. Now, for somebody like me, that's very difficult to find that focus and to be efficient because I'm not an efficient communicator. It's just not how I'm wired.
If anybody's listening to this show, they know that honestly, that's true for both of us. So, I think we get it.
Fair enough. But again, it's helpful to point it out and it's helpful to hear, to just take that moment and say, what do I need to tell this person? What can I maybe tell this person? And then what do I definitely not need to say? What is not important? And it may take a while to get there, but hopefully, fingers crossed, you can eventually figure that out. And then it helps to, it helps move forward with the therapy. So speaking of therapy, we're going to see what happens when we get Jonah Hex on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Jonah. I'm Dr. Issues.
Doc.
I understand this can be a bit overwhelming, so please feel free to say as much or as little as you need.
You're right. It's a lot to take in, but I've been in bigger scrapes than this. I can get by.
If you don't mind my asking, how did you end up in this time anyway?
Truth told, I can't recall. I just got done beating the hell out of some horse's ass come to town to cause trouble. Went to a saloon to drink away the pain. Must have passed out, and when I woke up, I was in a field. Took a walk to ask someone what happened, and come to find out I was in the future. Now, lucky for us, ain't the first time I've been in this now, but I never been in this now. So best I can figure, someone either wants me here to fix something, or they don't want me where I was so they can ruin it. Either way, I aim to find out what it is and go back home.
That's an incredible story.
Doc, if you knew half of the things I've seen and done, you'd turn white in a preacher's collar. And for you, that'd be quite a feat.
How vivid. Anyway, that's not something I think I can help you with. Any hints about what you're meant to do?
Nope. Usually if it's important, whoever needs to get to me does it quick. These time folks ain't about wasting it.
But what about wasting yours?
What do you mean?
I mean, your time is as valuable to you as mine is to me. I mean, all this jumping around and fighting for what?
And I don't get too attached to that.
But you do have fun, relaxation.
Fun? Man, you ever get your jaw rattled before? Right on a scar that can't bleed but still hurts like hell?
I've been punched, yeah, but not... Wait, where are you going with this?
I'm saying folks in my line of work don't get cushy jobs. We ain't got no vacation. Ain't no benefits. If I get a knight or a woman, well, as I heard some of you folks say, work hard, play harder.
You are quite the visualist. How about lasting relationships?
I got boots that last me a lifetime. That's about it.
Family?
Next question.
But...
Next question.
All right. Sheesh. Clearly a source of pain. Is that what gets you the most?
What gets me the most is nosy people trying to be cute, asking the same question different ways.
Sharp man.
As sharp as this hunting knife I always keep handy. Want to have a look at it?
I didn't mean to...
No, man, I mean you won't. Look at this craftsmanship here. The serration is flawless on the blade, easy to release the flesh on contact. It's not as good as my usual blade, but better for survival stuff since I ain't got to fight right now. Just skinning carcasses for pelts.
Whoa, your whole demeanor changed. You're bright, you're engaged?
What? I never settled down like that, not again.
No, I mean, you're showing interest in something, and it's really obvious you want me to listen. I didn't expect that.
Well, what the hell am I here for then? I thought doctors like you listen to people. Now I want to talk about this, and you want to talk about my family? Just listen to me, would you? I don't ever get to do this until I got to save somebody's hide.
You lonely man.
Stop getting soft on me, you hear, Doc?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you want, I can set up some kind of training for you, because it's clear to me you ain't no survivalist. If I got to be stuck here until I get home, you need to be useful.
Is this your way of bonding?
Well, I ain't got any glue. I usually just keep some rope in my saddlebag. Comes in handy to keep the bounties in check, but, that kind of lesson come with practice. I can learn you something.
Well, you're making this awkward, and to be honest, we're running out of time.
Oh, shoot. We're just getting started. But don't worry, I'll figure out a way to get you a decent six-shooter. These newfangled guns, they ain't got the same grip. It just don't feel right. A man's got to learn to fend for himself. You get me, son?
Don't call me... Oh, wow. I don't think you realize...
Well, can't keep talking like that. I got to find a place to hit the hay. I'll make my way back to you, I'm sure of it. Just keep listening. I don't get to be this much of a sage to just anybody.
It's clear you need it, so I'll listen again and again and again, but I can't fill that obvious void you have forever.
Yeah, just as long as it's on the job. Nothing else. Now stay safe, you hear? Well, we had someone who commented on one of our YouTube videos, Rose Park Radio. She really liked the penguin voice, and she said, let Anthony voice the penguin in DC animation now. I don't know that I'll get the same work for my Jonah Hex, but listen, if James Gunn is listening, I mean, you can email us, capesonthecouch@gmail.com, or find us on any number of our social media sites, and I would be happy to take over the role of any of those characters.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes. Yes, please. Oh my God. I'm sorry. You actually got me excited for something that's not even happened yet.
Yeah, it's likely not going to happen if we're being serious here. But I mean, hey, I just appreciate the compliment. I think it was pretty cool. And so thank you. Thank you, Rose Park Radio. If anybody else listens to it on YouTube or anywhere else that allows you to like, rate, subscribe, please do so. I try and check them as fairly regularly as I can. And I do appreciate the feedback. We do love when our fans comment and share that stuff with us. You can, as I said, leave it on the YouTube. You can join our Facebook. We have a fan group. You can join our Discord. All the links are in the show notes. So check that out and engage with the community, because we do really appreciate the feedback. I know Matt said when he was listening to the arcade episode, he said, I was not expecting a New Jack reference. So we like throwing those things out there. It helps keep the listeners on our toes. Sometimes we don't know what's going to come out of our mouths, so keeps it fun for everybody. So recommended reading is the second volume of the Jonah Hex series. This is the Jimmy Palmiotti series. This is very much a serial story. It's just a day in the life of Jonah Hex, or, a couple days in the life of Jonah Hex. There's no arc. There's no real, you could pick up any issue and read that story, and it's just as valid as the next one. So upcoming episodes, we bring back Alan, one half of A&W Root Beer, Alan Dunford, co-creator of Grandma Chainsaw. We talked to him about the Kickstarter for Grandma Chainsaw 2. Then we bring back Jeremy Whitley to talk The Dog Knight, his upcoming original graphic novel. And we also bring in Indigo, the artist, on board. And then as part of our May Marvel Cosmic theme month, we will be talking Adam Warlock, which will be the week that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is released. And then the rest of May, we will be talking various Marvel Cosmic characters. We've got some good ones lined up for you there. So as always, all of our episodes are on our website, capesonthecouch.com. We are also proud members of the Gonna Geek Network. Go to GonnaGeekNetwork.com and check out all the fantastic shows there. I just re-recorded my appearance on Play Comics with Chris to talk about Cowabunga Collection. So hopefully that will be coming out in the next couple weeks. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Capes on the Couch. So please feel free to like and subscribe. We're going to be having some more social media content coming out soon. And I swear I do mean soon. I have a lot of ideas. It's just about actually finding the time to get the damn things done. So before we wrap things up, Doc.
So his name is Hex, and that implies some sort of spell of misfortune. And if you know his life, that makes sense. But I think some people need to hear this. If you're worried so much about your own history having just this permanent shadow of failure, don't worry about how much you have to pay to get rid of it, because what's going to be even worse is the receipt you get from regret of not trying.
There you go. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.